There is something very strange about childhood. It ended a long time ago, but many people are still living inside it. A man in his late 40s still feels his heart tighten every time his boss gives him feedback. A successful woman, loved and respected by everyone, still constantly feels that she is not good enough. A young father who always tries to please everyone to the point of exhaustion, but still fears being criticized. From the outside, those may look like problems of adulthood, but if we go deep enough, we often find something similar. Not a major event, not a tragedy, but words. Words that were repeated again and again for many years. Words that seemed completely normal. Words that adults often forget immediately after saying them. But children do not, because children do not hear words the same way adults do. Adults listen with reason. Children listen with their hearts. When an adult hears something hurtful from someone else, they still have the ability to question it. They can think, this person is angry. This person does not understand me. This person might be wrong, but children cannot, especially when those words come from their parents. To a child, parents are not only the people who take care of them. Parents are the first source of information about the world. They are the people who teach children who they are, how much they are worth, whether they deserve to be loved or not. Therefore, when parents say something enough times, the child will not see it as an opinion. They will see it as the truth. And then, many years after childhood ends, that truth continues to live inside them. Today, we are going to look back at 8 phrases that many parents have used, not because they are bad, not because they do not love their children, but because many people were never taught that words can become the psychological destiny of a child. And the first phrase is probably the most common one. A phrase that millions of children have heard, but few people realize its true consequences. Why do you always mess everything up? At first, it sounds like just a criticism, a natural reaction when parents are tired. When a room that was just cleaned becomes messy again. When a glass of water gets knocked over. When homework is done incorrectly, when a plan gets ruined. But what the child hears is not, you just made a mistake. What they hear is, you are someone who always makes mistakes, and that difference is huge. In developmental psychology, there is an important difference between judging a behavior and judging a person. When someone says, this is not okay, the child understands that their action can change. But when someone says, you always ruin everything, the message becomes, you are the problem. At first, children like this often try very hard. They check everything again and again. They are afraid of making mistakes. They are afraid of doing something wrong. They are afraid of being criticized. But what happens when a child lives with the fear of being wrong for too long? They do not become more excellent. They become more afraid. Many perfectionists today are not truly chasing perfection. They are trying to avoid the feeling of being judged. Every time they send an email, they read it 10 times. Every time they share an opinion, they worry about it all day. Every time they make a small mistake, they blame themselves terribly. Not because the mistake is big, but because deep inside, a part of them still believes, I am someone who always messes everything up. And the saddest thing is, many people spend their entire lives fighting a belief they never created themselves. The second phrase sounds even more harmless. In fact, many people believe it helps children become stronger. Don't cry anymore. A little boy falls off his bike. His knee hurts. His eyes start turning red. His tears are about to come out, but before he can cry, he hears, don't cry, be strong. You're crying over something like that? At that moment, something very important happens. The child learns that their emotions are not welcome. Their pain is not accepted. Their hurt must be hidden. At first, the child only stops crying, but over time, they learn how to stop feeling. Neuroscience shows that emotions do not disappear just because we ignore them. They simply move somewhere else. Suppressed sadness can become anxiety. Hidden pain can become anger. Tears that are not allowed to fall can become years of loneliness. Many adults today can handle work very well. They can take care of others very well. But when asked, "How are you feeling?" they do not know how to answer, not because they have no emotions, but because they have spent years learning how to separate themselves from their emotions. They become the person who always says, "I'm fine," even when they are not fine at all. And then, one day, exhaustion appears, not because they are weak, but because no one can carry unheard emotions forever. What a child needs is not to be forbidden from crying. What they need is to be taught that emotions are a natural part of being human, that sadness is not weakness, that being hurt is not failure, that tears are sometimes just the way the heart heals itself. The third phrase is a phrase that causes many children to grow up without ever truly knowing who they are. Why can't you be like other people? Sometimes this phrase appears in many different forms. Why aren't you as energetic as that child? Why aren't you as confident as your sister? Why aren't you as good as your cousin? At first, it looks like encouragement, a push forward, a very normal wish from parents. But what happens inside a child's mind is completely different. Because when they constantly hear that they should be like someone else, the child begins to believe that who they are right now is not good enough. An introverted girl may start to hate her quiet nature. A sensitive boy may start feeling ashamed of his emotions. A creative child may feel that something is wrong with them simply because they do not fit the expectations of others. Over time, they no longer ask, "Who am I?" Instead, they begin asking, "Who do I need to become to be accepted?" That is when personal identity slowly begins to disappear. There are adults who spend decades chasing goals that were never truly theirs, studying a major they do not love, doing work they are not interested in, living a life designed to make others happy, and then one day, they look back. They have everything they were expected to have, but they still feel empty, because deep inside, there is a child who was never allowed to be themselves. What every child needs is not to become a perfect copy of someone else. What they need is to discover who they truly are. Because a tree cannot grow healthy if it is constantly forced to become a different kind of tree. The fourth phrase sounds like love, but sometimes it creates invisible pressure that lasts a lifetime. You disappointed your parents. There are not many phrases that hurt a child more than this one, because children are born with a natural need to connect with their parents, to be loved, to be accepted, to belong. Therefore, when they hear that they have disappointed their parents, many children do not only feel sad, they feel threatened, as if the most important bond in their life is being placed at risk, a low test score, a small mistake, a decision that was not right, things that are completely normal parts of growing up. But when they become connected with the feeling of disappointing the people they love, everything becomes much heavier. Over time, the child learns a dangerous lesson. Their value depends on achievement. Love depends on whether they perform well or not. And then, when they grow up, they become people who always try to achieve more success. Not because of passion, but because they fear the feeling of not being good enough. They achieve one goal, then immediately rush toward the next one. No time to enjoy, no time to feel proud, because deep inside there is still an old fear. If I do not do well, will I still be loved? That is why many of the most successful people are also the people who find it hardest to be happy. They never learn that human worth does not need to be earned through achievements. It already exists, from the very beginning. The fifth phrase sounds very familiar in many families. Let me do it for you. It sounds loving, it sounds helpful. But when this happens hundreds of times, another message slowly begins to form. You can't do it. A child wants to tie their own shoelaces. The adult does it instead. They want to clean the table by themselves. The adult does it instead. They want to try solving a problem. The adult immediately steps in. Of course, parents do this because they love their children, because they want to save time, because they want things to happen faster. But a child's brain interprets it differently. If adults always have to do things for me, maybe I am not capable. Psychology calls this learned helplessness. When a person gradually begins to believe that their efforts do not matter, that someone else will always have to solve everything for them. And then, when they grow up, they lack confidence when facing new challenges, not because they lack ability, but because they have never experienced the feeling of, I can do this by myself. The strange thing is, confidence does not come from praise. It comes from experience, from trying, from failing, from getting back up, from overcoming difficulties with their own abilities. Every time parents give their children the chance to do something on their own, they are not only teaching a skill, they are building a belief. The belief that you are capable, and sometimes that is the most valuable gift a child can receive. The sixth phrase is often used as a tool to control behavior, but it can leave consequences that last in relationships for years to come. If you don't listen, don't blame us. If you keep acting like this, your parents will leave you alone. Many adults think this is just a way to scare children, but children do not receive it as a threat. They receive it as a real danger. To a child, the connection with their parents is not a luxury. It is a survival need. Therefore, any signal that love could be taken away causes a child's nervous system to go into alarm mode. Over time, the child learns that love is conditional. You have to behave to be loved. You have to obey to be loved. You have to do things correctly to be loved. And when they grow up, they carry that belief into their relationships. They constantly try to please others. They constantly worry about being rejected. They constantly fear being abandoned, even when there is no sign that it will happen, because that fear does not come from the present. It comes from a long time ago, from the years when love was turned into a reward, instead of becoming a safe place to return to. The seventh phrase is a phrase that many adults are still hearing inside their minds, even though the person who once said it has not appeared in their lives for many years. You are useless! Or other versions of it. You will never achieve anything. You are a failure. You are good for nothing. The most frightening thing about these words is not the moment they are spoken. It is the fact that they slowly become the voice inside a child's mind. Imagine a little boy who gets a math problem wrong. Instead of being guided, he is called stupid. Once, then many times. At first, he disagrees. He thinks the adult is wrong. But when a message is repeated long enough, the brain begins to accept it as truth. That is how beliefs are formed, not through one single event, but through repetition. One day the boy faces a new challenge, a competition, an opportunity, a dream. But instead of thinking, I will try, a familiar voice appears. You can't do it. The painful thing is that voice sounds like his own voice. But actually, it was never truly his. It is the echo of the words he heard during childhood. There are many adults who are afraid to begin, afraid to change careers, afraid to start a business, afraid to enter a relationship, not because they lack ability, but because they are fighting against an old belief, the belief that they are not good enough, not smart enough, not valuable enough. And the saddest thing is, many talents have never been developed, not because there was no opportunity, but because someone planted the idea in a child's mind that your efforts are meaningless. But the truth is, no child is born believing they are useless. No baby looks at the world and thinks, I have no value. Those beliefs are always learned from somewhere, and if they are learned, they can also be changed. Maybe not in one day, maybe not in 1 month, but little by little, through new experiences, through small successes, through people who see your value even when you cannot see it yourself. And finally, we come to the 8th phrase. Perhaps this is the most subtle phrase of all, because it does not hurt immediately. It does not contain insults. It does not contain threats. But it quietly weakens something incredibly important. Trust. Next time, next weekend, Dad will take you. Just wait a little, I promise. And then it does not happen. Once, twice, 10 times. At first, they are just small promises, ordinary things in daily life. Adults are busy, work comes up, plans change. But for a child, things are not that simple, because children do not judge promises with logic. They judge them through waiting. A child who is promised a trip to the park does not only hear a sentence. They start imagining, they start expecting, they start feeling excited. Inside their mind, that trip has already happened. And when the promise is forgotten, what is lost is not only a day at the park, it is a piece of trust. Over time, the child begins to learn something. Words cannot always be trusted. At first, that belief only applies to one person, but the brain often has a tendency to generalize. It expands to friends, to romantic partners, to coworkers, to life itself. That is why some adults are always suspicious, always waiting for disappointment, always preparing themselves to be abandoned. Not because they are pessimistic, but because they once learned that hope is something easily broken. The strange thing is, trust is not built through big moments. It is built through hundreds of small things. A promise that is kept, a meeting that happens, a sentence that matches an action. Those things that seem so small are actually teaching children how to see the world. Is the world a place that can be trusted? Or is it a place where every word can disappear at any moment? And after everything, there is something many people do not realize. Children do not grow only through food. They do not grow only through school. They do not grow only through clothes or toys. They grow through the messages repeated to them every day, every sentence, every look, every reaction. All of them help answer a very important question inside a child's mind. Who am I? Am I worthy of love? Am I good enough? Am I safe in this world? And what is worth thinking about is, most of us do not remember everything our parents said. But the body remembers. The heart remembers. The nervous system remembers. It remembers through invisible fears, through insecurity, through feelings of anxiety, through inner battles that last for decades. There are people who always feel they must be perfect. There are people who are afraid to ask for help. There are people who fear rejection. There are people who do not believe in themselves. And sometimes, the source of all of those things is not in the present. It is hidden inside very old conversations. Conversations that only one person forgot, but the other persons carried for their entire life. If today you are listening to this as an adult, you may have just recognized some familiar phrases. You may have just understood why you always doubt yourself, why you always try too hard, why you are always afraid of making mistakes. If that is true, remember one thing. Recognizing the source of a wound is not about blaming someone. It is about healing, because you cannot change your childhood. But you can change what you believe about yourself from today onward. You can begin to realize that not every thought in your mind is the truth. Not every inner criticism is your own voice. Sometimes, they are only old echoes that remain. And if you are listening to this as a father or a mother, please do not feel guilty. No one is perfect. No one always says the right thing. No one raises a child without making mistakes. What matters is not becoming a perfect parent. What matters is understanding the power of words, because a sentence can take less than 5 seconds to say, but it can take 50 years to forget. And sometimes what a child needs most is not a lesson, not a criticism, not a correction, but simply to be looked in the eyes and hear, "You have value, you are loved." You do not need to be perfect to deserve love, because children grow up and forget many things. They may forget their favorite toy, forget the clothes they used to wear, forget the gifts they once received. But they rarely forget how they were made to feel, and that feeling will become the way they treat themselves for the rest of their lives. So, before saying something to a child in a moment of anger, ask yourself one question. If this sentence becomes the voice inside my child's mind for the next 30 years, would I still want to say it? Because sometimes, what follows a child throughout their entire life is not what they experienced, but what they came to believe about themselves after what they heard. But before we end, there is one very important thing we need to talk about. Because after many people recognize their own wounds, they often begin asking a question. If these things have affected me so deeply, can I actually change? The answer is yes. But first, we need to understand something. Toxic words do not have power because the words themselves are special. They have power because they are heard at the exact moment when the brain is forming its understanding of the world. When a child is still young, their brain is like soft soil. Every message can easily leave a mark. If a child constantly hears, "You are so smart," they will begin to see themselves that way. If a child constantly hears, "You are a burden," they will also begin to see themselves that way. The problem is, the brain does not automatically know what is true. It only records what is repeated the most. That is why so many adults today are still fighting battles they never created. They feel they are not good enough, not smart enough, not attractive enough, not successful enough, not valuable enough. But if we look deeper, many of those beliefs did not truly begin with them. They began with messages that were repeated for too long, and that is exactly where healing begins. Not by denying the past, not by pretending that nothing ever happened, but by realizing that an old belief does not have to be a permanent truth. Maybe you have spent many years believing that you always disappoint others, but that does not mean you are truly disappointing. Maybe you have spent many years believing that you are weak, but that does not mean you are weak. Maybe you have spent many years believing that you are not worthy of love, but that does not mean that belief is true. The truth is, many things we believe about ourselves are simply old stories. Stories that were told so many times that we started believing they were our identity, but a person is not the story. A person is the one telling that story, and when you realize this, everything begins to change. You begin to hear the voice inside your mind more clearly. You begin to recognize the moments when you criticize yourself, the moments when you put yourself down, the moments when you treat yourself in a way you would never treat a close friend. And then you begin to realize something incredible. That voice is not always yours. Sometimes, it is only the echo of years long gone, the echo of criticism, the echo of comparisons, the echo of threats, the echo of disappointment, the echo of rejection. They are still there. But now, you have the choice of whether you continue believing them or not. There is a question that psychologists often use. If today you met yourself when you were 7 years old, what would you say to that child? Try to imagine. A child sitting in front of you. They are worried. They are afraid. They think they are not good enough. They think they always disappoint everyone. They think they must be perfect to deserve love. What would you say? Would you call them useless? Would you tell them they are weak? Would you say they are a burden? Of course not. You would be much gentler. You would be much more patient. You would see the pain that others missed. You would see a child doing their very best with what they knew at that moment. So why do we often give that kindness to everyone except ourselves? That is one of the biggest paradoxes of life. People who have been hurt often become the most compassionate people, but they find it very difficult to show compassion toward themselves. Maybe True healing is not about becoming a completely new person. It is about learning how to treat yourself in the way you needed to be treated a long time ago. And there is one more thing, something worth deeply reflecting on. Many parents have said things that hurt their children, not because they were cruel, but because long ago someone said those same things to them. This is what psychology calls the generational cycle. A father who grew up with constant criticism, then unconsciously uses those same words with his own child. A mother who was compared throughout her childhood, then continues comparing her child without realizing it. A family passes down pain, and the next generation continues carrying it, not because they want to, but because it is all they have ever known. And that is why awareness becomes incredibly important, because a cycle can only stop when someone recognizes it. Someone brave enough to say, "Things will be different from here. I will not continue this. I will learn a different way to love." You may not be able to change your childhood, but you can change the childhood of another child. It may be your child. It may be your grandchild. It may be a student. It may be any child who crosses your path in life. Because sometimes what changes the destiny of a child is not a huge event. It is simply an adult who knows how to say, "You did really well. It's okay. You do not need to be perfect. You are still worthy of love." And perhaps that is the most beautiful thing one human being can give another. Not money, not achievements, not status, but the feeling of being accepted, being seen, being loved without needing to prove anything. If today you are listening to these words and you are still carrying wounds from the past, remember this. You are not the things other people once said about you. You are not the labels that were placed on you. You are not the judgments of someone who was hurting. You are not the voices that tried to convince you that you were not good enough. You are more than that, so much more than that. And perhaps, after everything that has happened, the most important thing you need to know is, you were never the problem. You were only a child trying to learn how to love themselves while never being taught how to do that. And if today you have grown up, and you are still standing here, still trying, still searching for healing, then that says something very beautiful. It means that even though the past may have left scars, it does not have the right to decide the rest of your life. Because your story does not end with what happened. It continues with what you choose to do from today. And sometimes the biggest change begins with a very small decision. The decision to stop believing the words that once hurt you, and to start believing in yourself for the first time, completely.